Everyone, welcome to our Monday live stream. So glad you guys are here. It's always fun to see a lot of people in the chat ahead of time. Hold on just a second. I'm going to adjust my camera here. I was having a few technical difficulties this morning, so I didn't get everything adjusted as well as I usually like to. Christy is not able to be here today. Hopefully she'll be back next week. So thank you so much for joining me. And we are going to have a great time today talking about composting. I'm here on the side of my house. Don't usually live stream from over here, but showing you kind of the messy area of the garden, and we are right here by the compost sack, which we built yesterday for our video on YouTube. So hopefully you guys were able to catch that. Composting is always a really popular topic and a great way, sorry guys, I'm making some adjustments here, and a great way to get free fertilizer for your garden. So remember last week we talked about gardening on a budget. If you are on a limited budget or just want to conserve your resources, which who doesn't want to save money, you definitely need to be composting because it's a great way to get free fertilizer for your garden. You're basically making treasure out of trash that you would normally throw away, your food scraps, your garden waste, your shredded leaves, and all kinds of stuff like that, which you can make into beautiful fertilizer for your garden. So on yesterday's YouTube video, I talked about 5 tips to help you make compost faster, and also built a pile, and hopefully you guys were able to watch that video. If you weren't able to, then go back over to my YouTube channel and give it a watch. You're definitely not gonna want to miss it. So I did have a lot of questions in the comments, so I thought I would do a special live stream just for composting questions. So today I am going to be giving priority to composting questions. I pulled a few from the YouTube video and also from over on Instagram. So before we get started on composting, let's just say hello, see who's here with us today. Let's see here. I know we have people from all over the world, from Denmark. Tammy's here from Tennessee. Hello, Tammy. My Backyard Gourds is here, changed name from My Backyard 123, so welcome back. Nicole Marie, how are you doing today? Nicole Rodriguez. Oh my goodness, so many Nicoles here today. Horticulture Geek, wonderful. Yeah, it's so cool how YouTube brings us all together all over the world. It is a wonderful community here. We have a ton of fun. People are always rejoining us week after week and asking about personal things too, like how is your eye surgery? How's your grandma doing? All kinds of things like that. So it's really wonderful. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. Okay, Patricia, Rita, I got to meet Rita too at a book signing a few weeks ago. So Anisha, hi, how are you? So many people here. And I really do appreciate you guys sharing about the live stream with your friends so that we can all join in the fun together. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me here. A lot of people are asking how the book signing went on Saturday. We did a book signing. I did a book signing for my brand new book, Organic Gardening for Everyone, in Thousand Oaks, California, and it was wonderful. Got to meet several viewers came. Eva is on here today. It was wonderful to meet her and got to talk to a lot of people in the store about gardening and sign people's books. We handed out some free seeds, postcards, bookmarks. It was an absolute ton of fun. So thanks to all who came out. I am going to be doing another event in just a couple of weeks. The date is January 26th. All of the information will be in the video description. It's actually a nursery this time, a really cute, adorable, independent nursery called Topanga Nursery. It's in Chatsworth, California. And I'm going to be doing a little mini garden workshop on planting a salad in a container, as well as doing a book signing. So if you live in California and you missed the one on Saturday, join us on the 26th. It's at 1 o'clock. All the information will be in the video description. I would love to meet you. And before we get started, I am running a special today on my new book, just to let you guys know. If you purchase a signed copy of my book, on my website, all the links will be in the video description, you will get a free, absolutely free Bring on the Pollinators Cool Weather Flower Seed Packet. So you have to add both items to your cart and then use the code ORGANIC. So grab yourself a copy of my book, get ready for spring gardening season, and you'll get a free seed collection as well. It's Bring on the Pollinators Cool Seed Collection. All the information is in the video description once the live stream uploads. And this is good until this Friday. So you have all week to get ready for spring and grab the special on that. Okay, so let's jump into our composting questions. So get your questions ready, because I'll be sharing a question from the video comments, and also taking your questions live here, answering what I can. I don't claim to know everything about composting, but if I'm not able to answer your question, hopefully someone here in the chat will. There's lots of experienced composters and experienced gardeners, and I want to hear all your tips as well. And by the way, I'm feeling a lot better today. I was a little under the weather on last week's live stream, and much better today. So thanks for all who are asking about that. Okay, so question here I got on the video yesterday. First one was from My Backyard 123, who has now changed their name to My Backyard Gourds and is here today. And My Backyard, your question was, what about bread and buns? And I'm assuming that means, what about adding bread and buns to your compost pile? There are times when I can't use them all, all that you have on hand. So great question. I have actually never added bread to my compost pile, but from everything I've heard, it is okay to do that, but you have to make sure that you mix it in really well with your vegetable scraps, your shredded leaves, and that type of thing, because it can attract the rodents. So I would recommend not using like the sugary, like pastries and things like that, just using like old stale bread or old moldy bread, and then mixing it in really well with your shredded leaves, with your greens and your browns and that type of thing, to make sure that it doesn't attract rodents. And if you are having a problem with rodents in your pile, and the bread just increases that, then you want to obviously stop doing that, and maybe just stick with the garden scraps, the kitchen waste, and that type of thing. So I would love to hear in the chat here if anyone has experience adding bread to your compost pile and how it's worked for you. It'd be great to hear from some people here how that's worked for you in your compost pile. So, Sharon, hi, how are you? I'm glad you made it to the live stream. Cliff, I'm sure, is an experienced composter doing trench composting. And by the way, Cliff, I hope you're feeling better. I hear you have a really nasty sinus infection, which can be super painful. So make sure you rest up and get better soon. So, okay, let's see what questions are in the chat. And Sweet Potager Gardening has a question about trench composting directly in the garden. So trench composting is when you basically, thanks for the question, Sweet Potager, is when you basically kind of dig a hole in the garden, put your compost scraps in there, and then let it break down over time. So that's definitely a great way to do it. I know a lot of people, I have not personally done that before. I usually kind of stick to my compost sack and everything like that. And my compost bins and all that. But if anyone has experience, please make some comments in the chat here, so Sweet Potager can have some tips on that. So the only maybe pros and cons I could see, well, number one, the pros is it's super simple. You don't have to move your compost then to your garden beds. The con, or the maybe the offside of that, could be if you're planting your plants directly as you're composting, you might be more susceptible to animals and rodents digging through your garden beds, which could dig up your plants. So that could be one of the downsides to it. I mean, pretty much any method you do has its pros and its cons. So I would love to hear any comments about that, if anybody has that. Okay, here's a question or a comment from Sharon. I just started composting this past year. Your videos really helped me get started. Thanks so much for all the information that you share with us. Sharon, I'm so glad you're getting started, because a lot of people are kind of nervous to get started. I think I saw a comment before the stream started from Nicole, how she wants to start composting, but she's nervous that she's gonna mess it up. So I'm glad that you're starting, Sharon. Nicole, I wanna encourage you to start. There's lots of, I have lots of great videos on composting, and you just want to dig in there and get started. A lot of times it's trial and error when you first start. You see what works for you, but you're going to have a lot more chance of success if you use the tips I mentioned in yesterday's video on how to get your compost to break down faster. If you have enough materials to build a large compost pile like I did yesterday, this is the compost sack, and you can see how tall it is. It's about 3 feet or so tall and about 2.5 feet or so across. That's one of the tips for building a pile that will break down faster, is to build a large pile that will get hot. And that if you get the right ratio of materials in there, your compost and your pile heats up, your compost is going to break down in about 3 to 4 weeks, believe it or not. So stay tuned, because I'm going to be coming out here towards the end of the week and checking my pile to make sure that it gets hot, and then turning it, and we'll be doing a video on that, so you guys can check back with that. So just get started, even if you're just piling up your materials. I actually have this DIY bin right here where I tend to, I don't know if you guys can see in the bottom there, I like to just try and pile the materials up in this bin. And that way, at least they're out here, they're starting to break down. And then as I have enough composted, or as I have enough materials collected, I will then move my materials into a larger pile, like the one behind me. Sorry guys, my tripod is giving me problems here. Okay, there we go. All right, Nisha, how are you? It's always great to see Nisha. I got to meet her too a while back at the Mandarin Festival. Nisha is asking, how long will it take to break down? Does it take about 3 to 4 months for that kind of compost? Okay, so Nisha, if we're talking about a hot compost pile, when you get the right combination of materials, it can seriously break down in about 3 to 5 to 6 weeks, just depending on the weather and all kinds of different things. So it's much faster with a hot pile. With the cold pile, you're looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 months, even up to 2 years, depending on the kind of materials that you're using. So if you can get enough to build a hot pile, I definitely recommend doing that. However, that being said, a lot of people don't have the materials or don't have the space to do a pile like this. So I do have a video on small space composting in a little 5-gallon container, just like this. And the key is, well, number one, this container is fabric, so it allows for really good air circulation, which the microbes really need that air to help the compost break down quickly. And then if you're gonna compost in a small, a little container like this, you want to make sure that your materials are broken down very small. So go back and watch that video. I actually use a blender to break down my food scraps and try and chop up all my materials as small as I possibly can. And I believe it took about 6 to 8 weeks, maybe around 6 weeks for that small little container to break down. So Nisha, I know you're a little bit short on space, so that might be the way that you would like to compost. And I will put links for that video so you guys have quick access to it in the description of the live stream once it uploads to YouTube. And I'm seeing some questions in here. You're right, Steph, a cold pile won't kill seeds, weed seeds. So I don't like to use weeds in any of my compost. Even in my hot compost, even though it probably would kill the weed seeds in a hot compost pile, but I just don't like to put weeds in my compost because I don't really want to have the possibility of adding weeds to my garden. Okay, let's see here. Nisha, what about with worms? Are you talking about like a worm bin, Nisha? Mac's eating my compost right in front of me. Mac, it's finished compost, so it's okay, but I don't know why he's got his nose in there. But anyway, Nisha, I have found worms in my compost pile. They tend to come in when the compost is a little bit more broken down. And definitely when I add my compost to my garden, that definitely does help bring in the worms. And I have found that worms do come into the smart pots. So as I'm going throughout my garden and replanting things and digging down in the soil in the smart pots, I'm finding a lot of worms, which is amazing. So smart pots are just a wonderful way to grow. That's what this compost sack is. It's called a smart pots, for those of you who don't know. It's a breathable fabric, and it keeps everything nice and contained. It has a cover. The cover is actually in the background there. I took it off so you guys could see the compost pile. But the cover is fitted, so it fits right over it, helps the pile heat up quicker, and also helps keep the critters out. And I know a lot of you all have problems with critters. Okay, let me go back to my, my questions here. And I had another question on the video about brown materials that you can use. So the question was from My Go Blue, or M Go Blue. Have you ever used cardboard for your browns? And yes, I have. I tend to use leaves most of the time because I have a really good source of leaves. My friend collects them for me, bags and bags and bags of them for me every year. He brought over 2 or 3 trash cans full, actually about 4 trash cans full on Friday. So I have tons of leaves right now. But if you don't have access to leaves, well, you could go to your local parks and see if you can just collect leaves there. Christy, oh, Christy's here. Yay, Christy. I was wondering. I'm so glad that you're here. Everything Sunflowers and More is our moderator, and she is now in the house. So glad you're here, Christy. You can use cardboard. But what you want to do, especially if you want your pile to break down fast, is to make sure you break up that cardboard into as small a pieces as you can. And I always like to soak it in water just to make it kind of gushy, because you want it to break down as quickly as possible. So that gives you a really good chance of it breaking down even quicker. And I actually brought a little list here of some things that you can use for browns if you don't have a lot of access to shredded leaves. So one thing you can use, and I did see a question about this, is shredded newspaper. I wouldn't use the slick, shiny ads that you have like in the Sunday paper. I would just try and stick with the newsprint with the newspaper with the black print. I've used that before. If you're concerned about the ink on the newspaper, then just don't use newspaper, use something else for your browns, but it is possible to do that. If you have like shredded paper, you know, like when you shred maybe your old envelopes or your old bills or whatever, you can use that in your compost pile. You can use straw. Although Jack was asking a question about straw, it does take a really long time for straw to break down. So just be aware of that, that's one of the browns that just takes a little bit of time. You can use chopped up twigs, small branches. You can use pine cones. Use napkins, paper towels, toilet paper rolls, and what are they called? Paper towel rolls. You can use fallen birds' nests that don't have little eggs in them, of course. There's lots of different items that you can use for browns. So just try and get creative. Ask your friends to start collecting things for you. And then, yes, you can use tissues. I wouldn't necessarily use the scented tissues, but yeah, tissues would break down really quickly as well. You can use coffee filters, egg cartons, brown paper shopping bags, brown paper lunch bags, cocoa core, wood chips, bedding from chickens or like your hamster bedding, different things like that. So look up, if you want a whole comprehensive list, just Google. You can find lots of sources of lists for different types of browns that you can use. So hopefully that'll help give you some resources on what you can add as far as browns to your compost pile. Nicole, question, what is your take on dryer lint? I have never used dryer lint in my compost pile. I've seen some people say you can use it. Some people say you can't use it. So you know what, do a little more research on that. And if you're here on the live stream and you've used it before, please let us know what your results have been with that. Okay, let's see here. My worms make your compost with worms. That's great. A lot of people love to do the worm bins and even throw worms into your compost pile. I mean, basically, you guys, the bottom line is there's so many different ways you can compost. So it really just depends on the space that you have, the materials that you have available, and really just what you prefer to do. So you might prefer one method over another. Whatever you do, just get started, whether it's with a small little pile or whether you have time and materials to make a large pile like this, so you can get compost even faster for your garden. Okay, this is a great question from V. Dimmitt. I actually had written this question down because I knew someone would ask it. Does it take longer to break down if it's cold outside? Okay, I have never composted where it's freezing temperature, so I don't have personal experience with this. So you cold weather gardeners, please let me know. But from all the research that I've done and talked to people over the years, from what I've heard is if you have a big pile like this or even a bigger pile, the center of the pile most likely will heat up even in freezing temperatures. But the cold temperatures will most likely slow down the process a little bit on a big pile. But you know what? Don't worry about it, because if you're getting freezing temperatures, your compost pile might freeze. But as soon as the weather warms up, it's going to start cooking and start getting hot, and you're going to be that much further ahead than if you waited to start composting until the warm weather hits. So I would definitely recommend throwing your compost sack together, your compost pile together, even if it's cold outside, and get going. Now, Cliff, I had a feeling you would give a comment on this, and I'm really glad that you did. Cliff gardens in Idaho, where it does get very cold, and Cliff says it's tough because once the center cools, then everything freezes and you're done until spring, but it will continue to decay. Okay, Cliff, thank you so much for that insight. That's one thing I love about the community here, is everyone is learning together. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more information there on your question there, V Dimit, and just get started. Okay, the garden guy asks, is that all leaves? Okay, the garden guy, you're gonna want to go back and watch our YouTube video from yesterday where I showed how to layer this compost sack. No, it's not all leaves. To get a really nice hot compost pile, you want to layer green materials and brown materials. And you want to have a ratio about 1 part green to about 3 to 4 parts brown. But don't let that trip you up if you don't have the exact measurement. So go back and watch the video. You can see all the different things I layered in there. I've got food scraps, a lot of shredded leaves, coffee grounds, scraps from the garden. All different types of things are in there to help my pile heat up over the next week or so. We're going to hope to keep that cooking. Okay, D. Hamby, thank you so much for leaving me that comment there on YouTube. I did see that. What did you think of my idea of putting branches under your compost sack for additional airflow? I think that's a wonderful idea. I've done that before and it works great. I didn't do it in this particular situation. Actually, I think I might have a couple of 2x4s under this. But the compost sack got so heavy, so it's kind of sinking down onto the ground, but you can definitely do that. I don't have a huge problem with airflow in the compost sack because the fabric is breathable. So the compost doesn't tend to get too overly moist in the with the Smart Pots fabric. And by the way, guys, this fabric is super, super durable. And this is a really inexpensive way to have a compost pile and keep it nice and neat and contained. So if that's something that you would like to do, absolutely go for it. I think it's a great idea. I love sharing all of our ideas here together. It just is so much fun. Okay. There are just questions flying by. I'm going to get to whatever I can today. Compost is a really super popular topic. Camilla, let's see about need your help. How do I grow peppers and tomatoes in Alberta, Canada when it has a growing season of 115 days? Oh my goodness, Camilla, I forgot you just moved, right? You are going to want to start your seeds indoors as soon as you possibly can. Well, not as soon as you possibly can, but definitely start seeds indoors. I'd say maybe 10 weeks before your 10 to 12 weeks even before your last frost date there in Canada. That way your plants are as big as possible so you can get them outside as soon as it's warm enough outside and get them growing. So you're going to definitely need some grow lights to get that set up indoors so that your plants can grow and thrive and get them outside to get the best harvest possible. So hopefully that will help. Okay, Nisha, great question too, Nisha. Can it be in the shade or in a sunny area? Okay, honestly, guys, it really doesn't matter. Right now, this side of my house gets shade about half the day. And then you can see behind me, it's starting to get sunny here about 12:30 or so. But as the time progresses, the winter whatever, we get closer to spring and we have more daylight, I get much more sunlight in this area. So it really doesn't matter. Put it in the shade, put it in the sun, put it wherever you have space. Obviously in the sun, it's definitely going to help heat things up a little bit more. But I wouldn't worry too much about that as long as you're just get started. But if you have to choose a space and you have the space available, I would definitely pop it in a spot where it's going to get a lot of sun to help it heat up more. Okay, Travis, yeah, it's okay. I'm glad to have a lot of questions today. It is a very popular topic, as you guys can well see. So make sure that you, if you haven't yet, go back and watch the YouTube video from yesterday. It's got a lot of great tips in it, and share it with your friends, because a lot of people want to start gardening but think that it's too expensive. And I talk a lot about that in my new book on how to keep things inexpensive in the garden, and composting is definitely a good way to do that. So don't forget, you can grab a signed copy and get a free Bring on the Pollinators flower collection today over on my website with the code ORGANIC. But you do have to add both items to your shopping cart. The seeds won't pop into your cart automatically when you get a signed copy. So take advantage of that. Go over right now and grab one, and lots of great, quick, simple, inexpensive tips for your spring garden in my brand new book. Okay, let me grab another question here from the YouTube comments, and then we'll come back in the chat and answer as many as we can before the live stream ends. Okay, this is a really good question about, is it okay to make a compost pile with a ratio of 1:1? Now, in case you're not sure what that means, this person is talking about with 1 part greens to 1 part brown. So greens and browns simply refer to the types of compost materials that you're using. So we already talked about what some of the brown materials are. It doesn't necessarily refer to the color of the materials themselves. Browns are a good carbon source. They help add air and bulk to your compost pile. And leaves are a great source of browns. Greens are considered a nitrogen source and are what help your compost pile heat up. So you can definitely, again, you can make compost however you want, but if you want it to break down fast, the ideal ratio is 1 part green to 3 to 4 parts brown. So that's just the combination that helps your pile heat up, helps keep your microbes happy. The microbes are teeny tiny little organisms that chew through or eat through all of this beautiful organic matter and help turn it into light, fluffy soil. So you can do a 1:1 if you want. It may not heat up. It may take longer to break down. But again, just get started composting, and through a trial and error process, you're going to have yourself some really nice free fertilizer for your garden. Okay. Travis, what's the temperature where you are today? Yeah, because you guys can see I'm wearing a coat. It is actually, I'm kind of a weather wimp, so you guys might know, here in California. It's about 60 degrees today, but here on the side of my house in the shade, there was a little breeze blowing. I was kind of chilly, so I do have a jacket on. I know for a lot of you, that would be like a heat wave. So, but I'm going to send some sunshine your way, and hopefully spring gardening season will be here for you northern gardeners before you know it. Okay, question from the Broadway Gardener. Would the book still be useful if you live in a colder zone, or is it specific to your zone? It is not specific to my zone. It is helpful to gardeners all over the world, because there's information, there's basic principles in there, not just information for California, but basic principles on what's a cold weather vegetable, what's a warm weather vegetable, how do you start from seed, how do you set up a grow lights in your house, quick, simple, inexpensive, how do you transition your plants to outdoors, how do you build a simple raised bed garden, how do you install drip irrigation. All those questions are answered here in this book. Organic gardening for everyone, because everyone can have a garden, and we do it in a quick, simple, inexpensive way here in this book. So this is good for gardeners all over the world. Great question. Thanks for asking it. Okay, hey CaliKim, what percentage of your food are you able to grow yourself? From Shocks Rice Ice. You know what? I don't really know what the percentage is, but we pretty much grow, especially in the summertime, all of our vegetables. I don't hardly ever buy vegetables in the summer. I do a little bit more often in the winter. However, I do try and just eat seasonally the vegetables that we have in our garden. So right now we have a ton of greens. So we're eating a ton of greens. We've got kale, pak choy, I can't even think, all kinds of lettuce, chard. We don't have peas yet. I'm still waiting for my peas. So I pretty much stick to a lot of salads in the winter, and in the summertime, we do, of course, tons of tomatoes, grilled vegetables, squash, beans, all that kind of stuff. I'm not a vegetarian, so we do grill vegetables and then, throw some meat on the grill right along with that, primarily in the summertime. Okay, let's see here. Looks like there's a question about watering. And check out the video from yesterday on YouTube. Guys, you do not want to miss that video. It really has lots of great tips. And I show exactly the moisture that your compost pile should be. You don't want it to be super soggy, because again, those little microbes don't like it super soggy, and super soggy can also bring in bacteria and cause your compost to go anaerobic. So you want it about the moisture of a wrung out sponge. So you can see here, I could probably water down the top just a little bit, but my cover was giving some condensation, so that'll probably give it a little bit of moisture here. But you want it about the consistency. Let me grab a handful from down below. Actually, it already feels warm. We just built it yesterday. If you guys can see here, it's damp, but it's not dripping wet. So check out the video and you'll see exactly the moisture that it should be. Okay, let's see, jump in here, see if we have any more questions. Let's see here. What greens can I find in the winter for a compost pile? Okay, if you head out to your garden, if you have any trees that might need trimmed that aren't dead and brown yet, you can trim up some trees, collect food scraps from your kitchen. Definitely when you're chopping up things for salads and you cut off the tops of the tomatoes or the cucumbers or any kind of food scraps from your kitchen, except for meat and dairy products. You can pop in your eggshells. A great source of greens for your compost pile, one of my favorite is coffee grounds. Number one, because they're so tiny, there's no chopping involved. Number two, you can get a ton of coffee grounds free at most Starbucks. A lot of local coffee shops will save them for you. I actually went around to 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different Starbucks last week collecting coffee grounds, and I dumped it all in my pile yesterday. I got over a 5-gallon bucket full of coffee grounds. So definitely check with your local Starbucks. Some of them even set them right by the door. Others you have to go in the morning and say, can you save them for me? And then go back the next day or later in that day to pick them up. So coffee grounds really heat your pile up fast. They're a great source of greens and pretty much readily available for most people. So definitely collect those food scraps and coffee grounds. Okay, great question here from Jamie. Can I just do my compost in a blue bin? Lazy compost, absolutely. Like, can I just throw a bunch of stuff in there and just let it rot? You absolutely can, Jamie. You know what I would recommend is go over to Mumbai Balcony Gardener's YouTube channel. And she lives in Mumbai and grows everything on a balcony, composts inside her house. And I believe she does have a video called Lazy Compost. So go check that out. She does an amazing job with a small space. So if you think you cannot garden in a small space, you've got to go over to her channel and check it out. There's absolutely no excuses. Once you watch her videos, you won't believe. Sorry, my little hotspot here is going dead. You will small little container like this, and that's pretty much all you need to get to composting. Okay, sorry if there's a little break there. My daughter was just calling me, and I think it might have disrupted the live stream. So anyway, guys, let's see if there are any other questions here. Whoops. Okay, where can you purchase compost bins on a cheap budget? You know what? Just make your own. You don't really necessarily, I mean, you could definitely purchase one like this. I love this because it keeps everything contained, but just make your own. I've got a video on how to make a DIY compost bin like this one right here. It's made, I don't know if I can get my phone over that way. It's made out of wire mesh and T-posts, or you can just pile it up and let it rot in a corner of your yard. You don't necessarily have to have a bin. You could also compost in a trash can like one right behind me. Those are fairly inexpensive. So there's lots of different ways to build a bin on the cheap. Okay, question from Steph. Do you ever freeze your scraps until you're ready to compost? Yes, I do. And I think I left the part where I added food scraps to my compost pile out of the video. I'll have to go back and watch it. But I did add some food scraps in here. And I did have a bag in the freezer. Now, that's not my favorite way to store the food scraps because sometimes it makes your freezer kind of smell. So unless you have a dedicated freezer to that, which a lot of people don't, pretty much what I do most of the time is just pile them up in my little kind of holding compost pile right here. And then once I have enough stockpiled, I'll make a larger sized bin. So there's lots of different ways you can stockpile. Freezing them is definitely an option, and it actually helps them break down just a little bit quicker. Okay, great comment, sweet potato, or sweet potager, sorry. The dollar store sells huge fabric bags for $1. So that could be a great way to get started too. Okay, let's see. So not enough greens, less heat. Very good question, Dot to Trot. I actually meant to mention that. Yes, if you're having problems getting your large pile to heat up, do add some more greens. So I'll be checking this pile in a couple of days. If it's not heating up, I'm going to throw in some more coffee grounds, mix them in, and that usually does the trick of helping it heat up faster. And if your pile is too wet, you can add some more browns. So add in some more shredded leaves, add in some more cardboard, some of those brown materials we talked about earlier in the live stream, and that will help soak up some of the extra water and make it not as wet. Okay, yes, no animal feces, too much bacteria in that. So don't add your dog or cat feces in. Definitely don't do that. I just like to stay away from it altogether. I don't like to recommend it even in a hot compost pile because I don't want to take the risk of, the bacteria. Okay, Mike Bordeaux, I am so glad you asked this question too because I totally meant to bring this out. Have you ever had any issues with critters in or around your compost pile? Okay, yes, I have. We always have some kind of rats in our backyard. I don't have a lot of problems, but what I do to help avoid it is, number one, I cover my pile. So that compost cover, sack cover that fits over this, it's a fitted cover. I will clip it down pretty good around the edges. That definitely helps keep the critters out. One thing that really helps too is if you mix in your food scraps, mix it in. Don't just put them on top, but mix it in with your leaves, cover it with leaves, cover it with additional soil if you have some extra soil. That way it kind of masks the smell from the critters. So that definitely does help covering them up and then mixing it in with some additional browns. Okay, let's see here. What about grubs from Alma? Okay. Grubs are really gross looking. I know when I see grubs in my compost pile or in my garden, I don't like to see them. But in the compost pile, they're not terrible. They actually are breaking things down for you. So while it might be a little freaky to see them in there, they're really helping break down the compost, the organic matter, that much quicker. So don't freak out too much. Grubs also bite. Eva actually didn't realize that they bite. So maybe just stay away from them in the compost pile, I guess. If you have any experience with grubs, let me know. Okay, I am answering the questions that I can. I know a lot of them are flying by fast, and I can't answer all of them, but definitely answer what I can. We'll answer one or two more. Catherine, great comment. If your greens to brown ratio is correct, there won't be a smell other than an earthy one like dirt. Absolutely. Now, the same thing with bugs. If you're having a lot of problems with bugs, you definitely want to cover your food scraps with your browns, and that definitely helps cut down on the bugs. Okay, how do you know when compost is ready to use? That's a great question. And let me grab my little finished compost bin here, or it's fairly finished. It's still got some materials in it that aren't quite broken down. But you know when it's ready to use when you don't see any big pieces of food scraps in it and when it pretty much looks like soil. So you can see here, this has got some twigs. You can see little pieces of eggshells in it, but for the most part, it looks like soil. You don't see any big chunks of like a banana peel or celery, old chopped up celery, or pieces of lettuce or anything like that. It's broken down really, really nicely. It's nice and light and fluffy. It looks like soil. It smells like soil. It smells wonderful. Some things that take a little bit longer to break down are still in here, like some eggshell, a little piece of an eggshell, but that's going to be fine to add into your garden. It's got some twigs, some leaves and things like that, but this is done. It's ready to add to my garden. So it looks like this. You are ready to roll. And to use it in your garden, all you need to do is just take a handful, put it around the plant that you want to fertilize, scratch it right in, water it in, and that's pretty much it. If you're going to add it to your garden bed, you want to add maybe an inch or two over the top, and you can mix it in if you want to, lightly with your pitchfork, rake it in, or you can just let it sit on top and then water it into your garden bed or into your, so all the nutrients soak down into your garden bed or into your plants. So it's pretty much it. It's super, super easy to use. And once you get the hang of it, you will never go back. And you'll be composting, looking for all kinds of things to compost. Okay, question. I see a lot of questions on citrus flying by. I do use citrus in my compost. I have never had an issue with it. Some people say use it. Some people say don't. Some people say the acid in the citrus inhibits the microbes from doing their work, or inhibits the worms from coming in. You know what? Just experiment with it. See what works for you. I've used it in my pile for years. I've never had a problem with it. My compost breaks down and works great in the garden. So there's just different schools of thought. So just do whatever you prefer. The bottom line is there's a ton of different ways to use compost, and you just got to try it and see what works for you. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget about the sale I have going until Friday. Buy a copy of a signed copy of my book, and you're going to get one of these beautiful seed collections. The Bring on the Pollinators, Cool Weather Flowers. There's 6 varieties of flowers in here. There's poppies, calendulas, dianthus. Let's see what else. Chinese forget-me-nots, which are beautiful. And there are nasturtiums, which are one of my very favorite flowers. So you get this free when you buy a signed copy of my book over on my website. Use the code organic and add both items to your shopping cart. All right, guys, we will see you sometime this week on a video, and on next week's Monday's live stream at noon Pacific time. And share with your friends that we're doing this every Monday. We have a great time here. We would love to have all of your friends join us as well. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.